Hi, I'm David, and a very warm welcome to another edition of People and Politics. Joe Media is an online social media network which covers a whole range of topics, from sport to entertainment, health, and of course to politics. And joining me on today's show is Oli Dugmore. Ollie's been head of news and politics for the last 6 years at Joe Media, and I'm really looking forward to talking to him about the evolution of politics over the last few years and looking forward to the general election later this year. So, welcome to People and Politics. Now, Oli Dugmore, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's great to meet you.
Likewise, David. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. No, I've been following the work of politics, Joe, particularly on YouTube for a long time, and it's a big fan, and it, it is great. So I thought we'd start off for people who don't know. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about yourself and politics, Joe.
Sure. My name is Oli Dugmore. I am the political editor at joe.co.uk. So that day to day means managing Politics Joe. I've been working in journalism now for nearly 10 years. I live in London. Before I worked at Joe, I worked at LBC, The Times, Sunday Times, and a student newspaper called The Tab. I've started presenting a show on LBC now as well, on the weekends. And in terms of Politics Joe, so I've been at Joe now for just over 6 years. That's how old Politics Joe is as well. Joe is it's a social media publisher, so we publish social media content about all sorts of things, actually. Started mainly in football, and started in Ireland, and then sort of piggybacking off that success, launched in the UK. We have an office in London and an office in Manchester, and it's sort of the editorial scope is basically everything for the modern Brit. So, we cover sport, we cover entertainment, we cover gaming, and politics as well. And I'm in charge of that political side of things.
I think I'm right in saying that Joe is in it's in a younger audience from 18 to 35, and I noticed that you studied politics at Cardiff, and that got a first, which is really impressive. So you must have decided at quite a young age, or as a young person, politics must have been in your life from quite young. And so, what was your first consciousness of politics, and where did that come from?
Yeah, I must say on that point about the getting the first at uni, I got 69.5 as my overall grade, which got rounded up to 70, which made it a first. So I got it by the skin of my teeth.
I think that's pretty damn good though. And if it was me, I wouldn't bother telling anybody that.
Yeah, maybe I should keep that to myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got it by the skin of my teeth. No, and I guess like a lot of people, I had a really engaging politics teacher at school, who really sort of switched me onto it. And I was thinking about doing journalism as a career, or getting into it. Actually, I originally was interested in photojournalism rather than writing or presenting. And I went to like a careers fair, and there was a guy from the local paper there, And he said, "Oh, if you want to go and if you're thinking about being a journalist, don't do a journalism degree. Go and study something you're interested in. You'll develop all of the transferable skills that you would need to be a journalist, whether that's writing, passing information, reading source material, constructing an argument, whatever it is. And then you'll be able to go and do journalism in the thing that you've qualified in and be an expert in it." So that's how I ended up studying it. In terms of my sort of political awakening, shall we say, that would be the student fees demos just after the coalition government came in. I remember actually sort of in my politics classroom and with my friends being like, "Oh, who's this Nick Clegg character? He's saying some really interesting stuff. Abolition of tuition fees, legalization of cannabis. These are sort of political ideas that are sort of a departure from the kind of consensus and neoliberal consensus, particularly sort of post Thatcher and through the Blair years, and sort of piquing our interest. And then obviously going into coalition and not just abandoning a promise, but going further and rather than saying we won't abolish it, we're going to keep them, actually tripling tuition fees. And that was kind of my first brush with the political class, I guess, that you sort of go, "Oh, you told me you were going to do one thing, you're doing something completely different." So yeah, bunked off school to go to the protests in London, went on those marches and ended up outside Millbank Tower at the CCHQ offices. I must say I wasn't any of those people that were, charging around, vandalizing the buildings or going up on the roof or anything like that. But that was kind of where I first encountered with politics.
You didn't climb the cenotaph or
no. It's on my bucket list, David.
I think it's always good to have goals.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So how much do you think your upbringing affected that? Because and you know more about this than I do. It seems to be getting harder to get young people involved with politics. So I was at a football match a couple of weeks ago, and I was with Ryan, and we were talking about politics, and I was with somebody who I think he'll be getting near 60, but I wouldn't like to ask, and he's not a stupid person. He's done really well in his career. Presumably, he'll pay in the top rate tax. He told me, he said, "David, I've never voted in my life." And I just find that just astonishing. And there's a lot of people like that, and young people. How do they get young people involved with politics?
Yeah, I would say it's less to do with I guess education is part of upbringing, right? So they are connected, but I would definitely say, like, I didn't grow up in a overtly political household. My mum worked in the public sector, so you're kind of conscious of sort of unions and the impact that political decision making has on people's lives, but I wouldn't, we weren't sort of debating Marx at the kitchen table or anything like that, certainly. I think so I'll say something about voting first, and then I'll talk a little bit more about younger people. So on that point about whether or not people should vote, and I understand the arguments, particularly around having an Australian style system, right, where essentially you're required legally to vote. Now, you don't actually in the end have to, it's very lax, but actually just having a very low level, I think the fine is like something like 30 Aussie dollars or something in the end, but most people don't, they sort of reach out to say, "Why didn't you vote?" And very few people actually end up receiving that fine in the end. And I understand the arguments in favor of that: higher democratic participation, investment in the political system, and a higher level of political consciousness. if someone makes the rational decision and says, if I participate, I am consenting. So maybe it's not explicit, but voting is certainly, I would say, a form of tacit consent, that you're essentially saying, I view this system as credible. I am participating in it, so I believe it. I believe it to be credible. And if you are, I guess, at the most extreme end, some kind of sort of anarcho syndicalist, whatever, whatever, take your pick, and you don't want to participate in the democratic process because you on a fundamental, ideological, theoretical level, you disagree with it. I totally accept that point. I'm not going to stand in front of that person and say, no, you absolutely have to vote. Similarly, if you are, I don't know, disgusted with the political system and you want to protest, and one of the ways you decide you're going to protest is by not voting, or going, I'd say probably a better way of doing that would maybe be going to the polling station and spoiling your ballot, maybe than not voting. But nonetheless, you say, I don't want to vote because I'm so appalled by not only the behavior of the last government, but the political platform that's being offered to me by the next party, or some kind of wider, I don't know, corruption scandal, or let's say in the wake of the expenses scandal, you say, I am so enraged by the behavior of these MPs, I'm not going to vote. I accept that. The thing I can't abide, and that really bothers me, is apathy. If people are just going, I'm not going to vote because I can't be asked. That's not good enough in my mind. That's unacceptable. Now, when we're talking about younger people, and particularly actually historically, the trends in the UK are that younger people do have lower turnout, right, than the older generations. Why is that? And what is that reason for failing to participate? Is it apathy? I think it's more of a factor for younger people than it is for older. I think there's less sense of civic engagement with people who are a younger age. I think people who are younger, and this is where I think the point connects, which is how do we get younger people more involved in politics, is that essentially politics has been a thing that happens or is done in the interests of older generations. So if you wanted to impose a class analysis on it, you would say, you take it further, let's go, oh, there's a working class, there's a middle class, there's an upper class. And you could say there's a wage class and there's an asset class. And large parts of our national politics have been conducted in the interests of that asset class, whether that's the preservation or increase in national house prices, whether that's the way that we tax capital and labor differently. All of those various aspects of our political system. And if you're a younger person sat here going, well, for the first time, we've broken the social covenant, right? We've broken the social contract. For the first time in my life, my generation will have a lower living standard than my parents. Mm-hmm. I won't be able. I will be able to, but I'll probably be in my 40s by the time that I'm able to afford a house. I've been encumbered by debt, trying to better educate myself and get the qualifications to enter the job market. Now, actually, the job market at the moment is pretty tight. And as a result, you're seeing those increases in wages in the private sector that are often inflation busting, as all these businesses vie to retain employees or to hire new employees. But there's also an entire cohort of people who are heading towards work in the gig economy, right? Which is insecure, 0 hours contracts, and often quite poorly paid. And I guess if you apply that context to a road and there's a sort of fork in it in front of you, and you can say, right, how about trying to do something about it?
Yeah.
How about trying to vote and do something about it? And I think that particularly this latest generation, this generation who are going to vote for the first time in this general election, I think they are geared up to give the Conservative Party a really good kicking in the next general election, because I haven't even mentioned, the GCSE results scandal, the A-level results scandal, the way that, we all know that one of the ideal conception of childhood, right, is you have this sense of free play and interaction, being outdoors. And for many, many months, we locked them up, right, during lockdown. I think they're angry, and I think they're going to go out and go after the Conservative Party. But in terms of it being an active choice to make their lives better, I don't know if they see it that way in whether it's the Labour Party. I think a lot of, if you then go a bit older, people who voted in 2019 or even in 2017, that were kind of galvanized by Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, its presentation of a genuine departure from political consensus, to say nothing of the many problems of his leadership, and the sort of the Brexit flavour to it, but nonetheless to go, oh, nationalise public services, a radical tax programme, and instead you see this figure being sort of traduced and derided. And as a result of that, you go, you know what? I had a person that I thought was genuinely going to change things, and the British establishment sort of rounded on him and opposed him because he was a threat to them. And as a result, I'm going to go, not for me, Clive. So I think younger people are increasingly engaged because they've realised that if you don't participate, politics is something that gets done to you rather than something that you contribute to. But I don't know how long that will last, and whether we can understand that expression as anything other than anger and opposition. I don't necessarily think it's like a affirmative choice or a positive choice. If that makes sense.
Yes, I particularly understand what you said about Jeremy Corbyn. I'm not now and never have been a fan of Jeremy Corbyn in any shape. But to give me enthusiasm, he did mobilize a lot of young people, and so it kind of gives me hope for the future, because the younger generation are seeing through the sort of bitterness and nastiness of the current generation in politics, particularly over the last 5 years. And I do have hope for the younger generation. I meet a lot of people that say that they would vote if there was an option on the ballot paper to say none of the above, but I think, well, what's the point of that? But there's also, but when people are earning good money and they're paying a lot of tax, I think by not voting, they're essentially saying, well, I'll pay the tax, but I don't give a shit how it's spent. I don't give a shit whether it's spent on health, education, and that to me is not acceptable, and or just not moral. But I wonder if you thought the present generation of politics, particularly over the last year or two, are making it harder and harder, as James O'Brien wrote a fabulous book, and he described to you, he described to you the bottom of the barrel. We're past that. We're at the slugs that lie beneath the barrel. And where we've reached such depth, and the bile and the real toxic stuff that's flowed out of the government over the last year and a half, to then turn around to young people or anybody and say, you really should vote. You really should have your say. They're not making it any easier for that. I think it has got really, really toxic, and it's going to get a lot more toxic over months to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, and I think you end up with a so there's an increasing trend, right, that starts with Tony Blair, that actually kind of you move away from cabinet government, right? And the phrase at the time was like sofa government, right? The Blair would be more inclined to sort of govern in a more executive fashion and have private one-to-one meetings with his ministers, so that decisions were made in advance of the cabinet meetings, where there was basically just an almost Soviet style, right, where you're announcing the thing so that the memo gets taken, and then the official record's there, but the decisions are already been taken. There isn't actually any legitimate discussion, and I think you can understand the kind of decline in cabinet government, possibly from further back there. But there's something more unique about the more sort of recent Tory years, and that is the original idea, right, that you would have a cabinet of the talents, that you want your strongest and your most able politicians within cabinet. One, because from a sort of personal perspective, you want your rivals, in the tent, pissing out, not outside the tent, pissing in. But also because it's better for the country, right? That you have the most competent and capable people governing. Now, I think there is an element of there is a shelf life on a political party's time in office, that we're kind of increasingly seeing that it's about sort of 14-ish years. If you look at the recent cycles, right, from now to New Labour to the Tories, Tories back to the start of Thatcher, you're kind of in and around that ballpark. That at a certain point, the political party just becomes exhausted. It no longer has ideas, although that's also possibly something about the Conservative Party that maybe we will revisit. But it's run out of policy material, approach. You struggle to reform, you struggle to change, because you've reached a point where you're reforming and changing the thing that you've already implemented as the political party. People resign, people are purged. In the case of, I think it was one of the more egregious things that Boris Johnson did, and that actually Keir Starmer is currently conducting within the Labour Party, in the way that he's sort of minimising and purging the sort of the left-wing aspects of his party. That Boris Johnson did very similar, right, during the Brexit wars, when your Rory Stewarts, Amber Rudds, David Gawkes, Dominic Greaves, that sort of the One Nation branch of the Tory party, that softer left side of the Tory party.
Reasonable people.
Yeah, well, exactly. Essentially, but it was over Brexit politics that essentially were the more Remain-minded people who couldn't countenance, the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. If you expunge those people from the party, they're very talented people. Do you know what I mean? They're some of the more useful cabinet ministers. And so then what you end up with, if you purge those people who are competent, is you just end up with people who are loyal.
Yeah.
And that's not useful. That's not constructive. You don't want, if you're going to have a political discussion, if you're actually going to try and do cabinet government in the way that it's meant to be done, where you debate, you discuss, and you settle on an idea. Well, it's no good if the people in there are all sycophants who just want to be teachers' pet and appease the prime minister. Exactly. And so you're right. That's how, as O'Brien put it in that interview I did with him, is that what is beneath the barrel? It's the slugs, it's the mud, and Ian Hislop said something very similar to me actually as well when I interviewed him, which is that you just end up with these sort of fanaticists who are either like totally ideologically committed to Brexit or totally ideologically committed to the idea of Boris Johnson, and it doesn't foster decent government. Yeah.
I think that's what happened, and I think the style of government has changed so much, because I was reading something by Ken Clark, and excuse me. Now Ken Clark sat in a number of ministerial cabinet posts, throughout the Thatcher years, and I think he was in John Major's cabinet, and he was saying that they used to spend a whole morning in cabinet, the fat end of 3 hours, sitting there talking about policy, what they're going to do. But when David Cameron came in, the cabinet lasted an hour. It was just so quickly, we're doing this, and that's because, like you say, they attract the loyal people and not the talented people, as as well, so it's becoming a bit like a dictatorship. And we don't have the brightest and the best brains. People like, I hate to say, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Davis, they are not the sharpest tools in the shed by any stretch of the imagination, but they're right up there at the top of government. I think that's part of the problem. And yeah, it's absolutely broken. And while all that's going on, we've got the bio being spouted, because that's the only word I can think of, by Suella Braverman, not so long ago, and more recently, right, by Lee Anderson. And it's absolutely bust. And I hope, yeah, like I said, Labour are likely to give the Tories a kicking, but not because they're in love with Keir Starmer, and because of frustration with the Tories. They still don't know who Keir Starmer is, and so I wonder if you had thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would look, I'd echo your point, by the way, about the sort of the horrific nature of some of the things that people like Lee Anderson and Suella Braverman have to say, whether that's, calling people demanding a ceasefire hate marchers, talking about a ceasefire in Gaza, calling them hate marchers, whether it's talking about, quote unquote, an invasion of illegal immigrants, whether it's, Lee Anderson saying that, well, calling for an end of the rule of law, right, that we should ignore the Supreme Court and just...
Yeah, and they can fuck up back to France.
Yeah, exactly. And these people are prepared to entertain the worst instincts of other people, right? That they are prepared to court people who hold horrific views for political gain. That should be their political epitaph. That should what should follow them around for the rest of their lives. Because I will tell anyone now that once you let that genie out of the bottle, you can never be racist enough for the racist parts of our society, right? You will never, you can think you're going, oh, well, it's just valid concerns about immigration. And by the way, I am not suggesting that people who do have concerns about immigration, whether it's, associated services, utilities and infrastructure, whether it's integration and assimilation, that, these are live questions and important questions that we have to ask ourselves as a society. Those people are not racist. Absolutely not. But there are people who hold those views in our society, and there are people that the Conservative Party is trying to court when they allow their ministers to say those things. And that is a very dangerous thing to do. Similarly, when the Labour Party tries to attack the Tory party from the right, when they try to attack the Tory party from its right flank on immigration, that is a very, very dangerous game to play for the same reasons that I just outlined. That dragon will eat you in the end. You can ask Ed Miliband, you can ask previous Labour leaders who've tried to do that thing.
To come back a bit, yeah, you're saying that the Labour attacking government over the migration, it backfired on Labour.
Yeah, I suspect it will. I suspect it will, and that is what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, to pick up on your point about the lack of love for Keir Starmer, I think that this is such a unique political moment in that. I mean, the scale of victory is open to question. It wouldn't surprise me, Don't forget, right, Theresa May and that 2017 general election, where all of the polls say it's going to be a landslide, the Labour Party is going to be destroyed, it's going to be eviscerated. They get on the campaign trail, it falls apart, and Labour deny her a majority. So as the saying goes, a week is a long time in politics, and there are many, many weeks before a general election happens, and all of this could change. I saw, John Curtis, the
Yeah.
topologist that's usually on the BBC when an election happens. He said, I think a couple of days ago, that there's now a 99% certainty that Labour will win the next general election. And as soon as I saw that 99% figure, I just sort of, I backtracked a little bit and went, I don't think you can say that anything in politics has that level of certainty attached to it. Now, whether or not the scale of victory is obviously open to question. I wouldn't put a hung parliament out of the question, but nonetheless, if current polling is carried out and it bears out in reality, we have to stop and think about how extraordinary that swing is. For the Tories to go from an 80-seat majority, a victory the size of which they haven't seen since Margaret Thatcher, to possibly being essentially wiped out electorally, that is extraordinary. That is an absolutely extraordinary electoral event, and we could end up in a very peculiar situation. Similarly, where the Labour Party has some insane number of seats, let's say like 500, 450, whatever it is, huge number of seats. But we still have to entertain the possibility, and I think this is what we should be very, very cautious of, that they could still be a one parliamentary term government.
Yeah.
Because of what you're saying, right? This Keir Starmer is not a particularly popular man.
No.
And what's more, actually, is if they fail to further elucidate and further specify the details of actually what their policy program is going to be before that election happens, they then have very little mandate to actually do anything. Right? It would be improper to go and make wholesale changes to the British political economic system. If you don't tell the British public what they are, you get in and then you just decide, I don't know, you're going to transition to a command economy or whatever it is you're going to do. Right? It's democratically illegitimate. But essentially, from what we've seen so far, the Labour Party is offering continuity. It's offering a maintenance of the fiscal rules that the Tories have imposed on us. There is you're already hearing from Rachel Reeves as Shadow Chancellor that there's no intention to institute a wealth tax. There's no.
I'm sorry, Ollie, as soon as you said that, I smiled because I thought about Rachel Reeves and her big speech to the city last week, which I watched. I was listening to, and you could sum up her speech with 2 words, and that's do nothing. That's it said, and it didn't make me smile thinking she's saying, "We'll do nothing." Really?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is the concern, right? Which is that right now, the electoral sentiment of that possible Labour landslide is fatigue, but I think probably more accurately to say hatred of the governing Conservative Party. It is a negative response. We've got to get these guys out. Okay, so what are some of the reasons that people want to kick them out of government? Some of it is sort of short-termist, scandal. So things like Partygate, things like the Liz Truss era, if we can call it that, the Liz Truss month, right, where she tanks the economy and sends everyone mortgages through the roof. Part of it is a negative reaction to that, but part of it also is a negative reaction to the Conservative policy of government, which is, I think, the defining thing is austerity and the economic slow malaise that's coming about as a result of Brexit. Now, if you're not going to offer an alternative to that, very quickly people are going to say, well, this is just as bad as what we had before. I'm not interested in this anymore. Yeah. And that's a problem for them.
Yeah. I think the majority of voters are concerned mostly about the cost of living crisis. At the moment, people are skint, right across the social spectrum, and people are in desperate poverty. And Rachel Reeves stands there and says, "Well, we're not going to do very much," and that's not going to attract a lot of voters. And I wonder if you thought the possibility that, as you said, I think it's very possible that Labour get in this year for one term. But during that term, the Conservative Party are under threat of swinging further to the right because the two people tipped for next leadership are people like Kevin Badenoch, Suella, very right-wing people. Penny Mordaunt, a terrific leader, but people are saying she's too reasonable, she's too lovely. So, and, after this, maybe it's not right till it's so far ahead. But my concern is that the Tories swing too far to the right, which makes the Labour Party swing to the right as well.
Yeah, I can understand. I can understand electorally from Keir Starmer, right, that if the Tory party moves to the right and you follow them to the right, everything behind you is yours, right? There's no other political party, the Lib Dems, but they're not seriously going to challenge the Greens again. It's barely even a pressure group in terms of the electoral pressure that they can put on the Labour Party. And I find that question about what will happen, that kind of ideological soul of the Conservative Party, what will happen next after possible electoral destruction, is really, really interesting. I know that there are conversations happening within the Tory party now about, do you start a new organisation? Do you go for entryism? Does everyone sort of flood into reform and try and turn reform into a new vehicle in the way that sort of left-wing people did with Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party? Those are ideas that are bouncing around, but you don't have to be some kind of political Svengali to see that those leadership contenders are already on manoeuvres, right? Suella Braverman telling a BBC documentary quite recently that she was desperate to have meetings with Rishi Sunak about immigration, but he didn't want to. He wasn't interested. He didn't take immigration seriously enough. Do you think Suella Braverman's being honest when she says that the man who has made stop the boats his number one political priority wasn't interested in trying to control immigration? I don't think that stands up to very much scrutiny. I think the only way you can understand that remark is in the context of Suella Braverman trying to position herself as someone who is ahead of the curve in relation to the immigration question, that she's going to be more hardline on it. I am concerned. You're seeing the flavour, right, already with all these kind of pop-up associated conventions and conferences, whether it's, the names of them change by the day, but PopCon, NatCon,
I don't know how they find the names. It's the one that was trust had the brass neck to hold.
PopCon.
Was trust that way. Yeah, and wait, she's still a star, and it's like, have you no shame, woman? Yeah, but that was just astonishing.
That's the thing I find most striking about her, is the complete lack of self-awareness. That she is like a figure of derision, right? She is a byword for incompetence, for arrogance, as the political Icarus, right?
Yeah.
There was a really good line in a New Yorker piece that just came out by Sam Knight. It's a long read about kind of 14 years of Conservative rule, and he had a line in it that really struck me, which is that people make the mistake of believing Liz Truss to be kind of an experiment or a sort of an outlier in the context of the last 14 years. But in actual fact, she is the symbol. She is the symbol of the party, of its kind of prioritization of someone who actually doesn't think particularly deeply about anything, but because they perform well on TV and are relentlessly loyal to the people who give them political patronage, that she's somehow credible. And I find that really, really interesting to consider her not as an outlier, but actually as symbolic of the last 14 years of Tory government.
And it wasn't just if you weeks ago in London, back at the last Conservative Party conference back in October. That was a year since her disastrous days in office, and she held a rally at the conference, and people at MIA were saying they were queuing down the stairs to get in and see what Liz Truss is like, and there was that cringeable thing where she said apart from Steve Bannon.
Yeah,
Just
insane, insane.
it's
You know, Steve Bannon.
difficult to find the words. To
Yeah, no, it really is. And you know, you've got Steve Bannon there describing Tommy Robinson as a hero. You've got Liz Truss saying that she sort of fell victim to the deep state. It would be funny if it wasn't so serious.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see this year. You think it'll be October? Apparently Jeremy Hunt let slip. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I suspect October, November. I wouldn't be surprised. Sort of a week after the Americans on November 14th. I wouldn't rule out January either. That he just kind of clings on for as long as he possibly can.
In fact, you're the second person I've heard say that wouldn't rule out January because just hang on in the hope that that a war breaks out or something.
Yeah, there's something will go better for him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm thinking that I've seen over the work that you do, you must have interviewed and met so many different people, and you've done some phenomenal interviews, and is there anybody that you would really like to spend time with again, and who you most inspired with, and what makes you inspired?
I think I prefer interviewing sort of thinkers and writers and philosophers than I probably do interviewing politicians, because there's actually like a degree of intellectual honesty and a degree of originality of thought that I would always much rather speak to someone who has something original and interesting to say rather than someone who has rehearsed what to say.
Yeah.
And you're going to hear the same thing over and over and over again. I was during the 2019 general election, we interviewed Corbyn probably more times than quite a lot of other people did, and I was always really struck by. He gave the impression that he was like tired. He gave the impression that he almost didn't want it, that he was kind of ground down and not had lost interest, but was kind of almost broken by the thing. And I found that really, really interesting. And it's an insight that I don't think many other people had because they didn't have as much access to him as we did. I find people like Zizek, like Varoufakis, fascinating because I mean, it's also incredibly hard to interview because you're simultaneously trying to understand what they're saying, whilst following the thread and what you're going to ask and talk about next. It's not an easy thing to do.
No.
But I like those conversations that are challenging because they are challenging. Because it's hard to do, and I find that very rewarding.
Yeah, great. I think I'm right in saying that most or all of your interviews are done in person, and most of them done in a studio in London. Yeah, that must be good because the difficulty that I have is I'm in Edinburgh, so I started this channel because I spend so much time listening to other political discourse. I thought, I want a bit of that, and I want a part of that, and so I thought the only way to get it is to try and create it for myself.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a good strategy. Build it and they will come.
And this is the best way I thought of frustrating, but I'm stuck up here in Edinburgh. But
Yeah, it's really hard, man. I think I I really struggle actually with Zoom as a format because I think that there's so much from being in the room with the person,
yeah,
building that rapport between the two of you, and so much of communication is non-verbal
of course.
that even here now talking to you, because of the difference between the internet connection, there's a pause, right? There's a
Yeah,
gap between. It's very hard to get that kind of back and forth that
yeah.
sometimes can make for a really interesting conversation.
But yeah, I would like to find a grant or a trust fund that might help me to buy some cameras and some sound equipment, and then I would start doing some in-person ones. I could start at the Scottish Parliament and stuff like that. But I'm unemployed. I don't have a job and don't have money to buy cameras and sound equipment. But if I had some kit, I would start doing one to one. Um, but because as you say, it's a lot better. So face to face and all quicker or more. Yeah, it's better. But maybe one day, I'm always looking for an opportunity. But maybe that will come. The interesting, I've not told member, but about earlier on, we spoke with Lee Anderson. Lee Anderson has agreed to do this with me. To, and, and I'm not sure whether or not to take him up with.
You should. You should.
I think it'd be great. I would really like to talk to the guy. And I won't tell him to fuck off. Um, uh,
Well, I'm not sure he'll come on if he hears you saying that
no,
now.
no, I won't tell him to fuck off. But it was funny because one of my friends was like, "Oh, no, you shouldn't give him a platform. You shouldn't give." But I've a different opinion. I think I might not agree with what he said, but I think everybody has the right to.
Absolutely. No, I see.
Yeah,
I think there's two arguments there. I think it's important that you speak to people you disagree with, and that there's political engagement and political discourse. I think those are two very important things.
yeah,
I think not there are quite a few media organisations that Lee Anderson won't appear on, won't participate in. So the fact that you've got
perfect.
him
Does
is
that mean
important.
does that make me lucky or privileged or?
That makes you big time. That makes you big time. And I think the other thing to say about platforming, we have this conversation all the time on Politics Joe, right? It's like who do we feature? Who do we involve? Do we have this person on?
Yeah,
And the test we often use is whether or not, if they come on our program, are we exposing them to a bigger audience than they would already or have already been exposed to? In the case of Lee Anderson, you're talking about a frontline politician, national politician. There are very few platforms really that he could engage with that will give him a bigger stage than he already has. We talk about it quite often. The test case is like, oh, if you landed a Trump interview, would you interview Trump? And the answer is, yeah, obviously you would interview Trump because he is a political figure. He's relevant. He requires scrutiny, and also the idea that that Donald Trump coming on Politics Joe, that we'd expose him to a new audience, obviously is laughable. He's one of the most famous people in the world. So
yeah. Yeah, it doesn't into that. And I think it's like, and the people who say, you shouldn't give an audience to certain people with certain views, you know, The people in Nigel Farage is slated and has, he has pretty vile views and a pretty vile past. But he is the person that's been on BBC Question Time more than anybody, any other guest. So it tells a story, people invite people that have a different view. So
Yeah, I agree.
and I've already I've already had several SNP people on, and I've a totally different view to that, but I still talk to them.
Yeah, absolutely, as you should.
Yeah, yeah. So and how there's a lot of people that I would like to invite on, but I don't know how to contact them. It's quite hard to contact. It's a way of finding that out.
Yeah, I mean, most MPs, for example, you're probably looking at kind of parliamentary websites. They've got email addresses.
Yeah, MPs are easy because they've all got email addresses public.
Yeah. But those kind of other figures, it's very useful to kind of look at like who represents them, either their agent, their management. Quite often with a lot of political people, you're talking about people that have book deals. So they will have publicists that work to promote the book. So you can get a hold of them that way via their book publicist. With a bit of sort of dedication and a bit of thought, you can generally get to most people. They and even if it you end up sort of on social media, a lot of people have sort of open accounts that you can send direct messages to, which is worth exploring as well.
I've written I've written to James Biden about 3 times. So next thing I'm talking to him for some yeah.
I'll put in a good word for you.
Yeah, could you put them? I would love to talk to him about his book. It was terrific. This really great.
Yeah.
Book. Yeah,
It was good.
And yeah, and hopefully I'll get more followers. I feel like I'm getting more and more views, particularly on my YouTube shorts, but I'm not. But it's not translating into new subscribers.
Do you edit the videos yourself?
Yeah. I edited the videos. I created the intro and outro and stuff. So, so I'm sure people can tell I've done it myself.
I don't know. I thought it was pretty professional. I watched a couple of them. I thought they were pretty good.
Yeah, but I really enjoy it anyway. But look, Oli, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great to chat to you. And
It's a pleasure, man. Really nice to talk to you.
Yeah, you should remember I can do it again sometime. And okay, take care. Thank you very much. Great.
Cheers, David. Thanks, man. Speak soon.
Yeah, that was great.